Let me start by asking a fairly simple question. But what is language? Language can be defined as a system of words or signs that people use to express their thoughts or feelings to each other. Thousands of different languages surround us and enable us to connect as human beings. However, languages can also disconnect us in a multitude of ways, specifically because of their misuses. The impact of language is typically underestimated, despite the fact that a single word can mean 1,000 things to one person that could mean nothing to another. Take the word fear, for example. When I say fear, what thoughts or images pop up in your minds? I know for me, it's failing the IB. But a myriad of different ideas may arise in each one of our minds. Scientifically, fear is a chain reaction, beginning in the brain, producing an almost entirely autonomic response, an involuntary response. On a more personal level, fear is more than just these neural impulses. It's what feels like a limitation. Now imagine saying yes to one of those things that you held great fear towards. Imagine that saying yes to your biggest fear, the thing that haunted you most, was saying yes to someone when they asked you to get out of bed, get dressed, and face people at work or in school or in public. Although this may seem like a norm to most of us, this is something that people with social anxiety disorder face. Hearing the word fear and equating my fears to someone else's never works, because each individual experiences and interprets things differently. Fear is a common denominator with many cases of anxiety. Yet the word anxiety itself isn't always used in the right context. With various types of anxiety that exist all around us, the word anxiety can spark different aspects of fear within different people. Let me zoom in to the social aspect of it, social anxiety. Although claiming that a certain person is just giving me anxiety may only actually mean moderate levels of stress to me, it touches much deeper levels to those who face social anxiety disorder. Their fears go far beyond just this shyness, but rather prevent interaction on social settings, gradually crippling their social lives. Social anxiety is more specific to the fear triggered in the idea of criticism, judgment, or rejection. Therefore, it does not hinder their ability to perform in any setting until put into a situation questioning their own comfortability through any form of disapproval, whether that be internal or external. This doesn't just end at an issue within one individual, but rather spans to those external individuals. A sign of social anxiety isn't always the easiest thing to detect. Social anxiety is the third most common psychiatric disorder following major depression and alcohol abuse. Yet, despite its rising nature in a communal setting, it is incredibly underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, or not even treated properly at all. In fact, less than 1 in 5 people who face an anxiety disorder are properly treated. Now, this can be partially due to the fact that it's not an issue that comes all at once, but rather it's the people that have an issue growing inside of them that day by day and year by year gets worse. It is most common in those in their mid-teens, so below the ages of 25, of which around 75% of these individuals have faced interpersonal issues at one point in their life. From an external perspective, it's hard to tell when someone has anxiety. It doesn't just end as this issue within one individual, but rather spans to these external individuals, asking the question of, how do I help? People who face social anxiety push themselves farther and farther away from social interaction. So, is that our responsibility to encourage them to be in social situations? Or do we let them maintain their comfort zones? And once we do that, doesn't it just get worse? Personally, my best friend, role model, and the sole person who takes away my stresses of the world has social anxiety. Let's go ahead and call her Simona. Now, my intention today is not to share all her experiences or my experiences dealing with social anxiety, nor is there really one purpose, but to touch one individual, whether that be somebody wanting to learn about social anxiety, someone facing social anxiety, or someone on the outside wanting to get in and help. It is vital to be there for people, regardless of how much they choose to reveal. But to do so, there has to be a basis of understanding. For me to be the best possible support system I can to Simona, I have to understand her. I'm going to share the steps I took in learning and understanding how exactly to be that supporter to somebody with social anxiety. In my opinion, trying to help is one of the most challenging things, because more than anything, I want to be that person to take her fear of people away from her and make her realize how beautiful she really is. But I also need to be aware that my mere comfort doesn't account for the years of an internal issue growing inside of her. There was definitely one pivotal point in my understanding of social anxiety. I was having a conversation with Simona about how the people closest to me are those who she's gotten along with. Because I not only see her as the best judge of character, but her personality is one that enables me to escape reality for a second and laugh so hard that my not-so-existent abs hurt. If someone is able to break down her wall, they've officially made a mark on my life too. In this particular conversation, I had no specific intent, but rather to express to her how I look up to her as more of a role model. The response I got greatly differed from the candid nature of this conversation. She started crying. Her tears came all at once and she could not stop. And that was somehow my fault. I made the person I care about most cry. But it wasn't about me, because she shortly revealed that her tears were out of honor. She didn't understand how she could mean so much to someone when she didn't even mean that much to her own self. This is when I realized it's not just this fear of people. It's a fear within oneself, a sense of criticism that they're limited in what they have to offer. Now, I cannot claim that I have had experience in social anxiety, but seeing it externally really puts my problems into perspective. I am not her doctor. I am not her therapist. I'm not even considered an adult in this country. So what am I? Let me try to describe my role. I am her supporter. Now, there's not one simple thing that I need to do to fulfill that role, because it's comprised of anything and everything that will ultimately make her feel better. One day, I could be the shoulder she needs to cry on just because it's one of those days. Some days, I need to be her pep talker because although she's not asking for my validation, she needs someone to help her believe in herself. And other days, my silent presence is just enough to make her aware she's not alone in this big world. One of the biggest things I've learned to accept is that as much as I want to help, it's about what she needs. When you're at a social gathering, say a party or event, and you hear the doorbell ring, welcoming new faces and friendly introductions, but you're caught up on the thumping of her footsteps, moving from a steady pace to a sprint, the first thing you're going to want to do is run right behind her and make sure she's okay. But she's not running from you. She's not running from the guests. She's running to hide herself. And as much as you want to be there for her, it's not about you. It's not about analyzing the situation to depict the one action that triggered her. It's about realizing that she's not okay with herself, and the amount of love that you feel towards her is exactly what you need to show her, because it's what she doesn't believe in herself. Another major thing I've picked up on is the way people use the word anxiety. Antisocial actually means to be immoral towards society or to want to impair harm upon society. not to just want to be alone. The word in itself is misused to a great degree because the extent to which anxiety can truly dictate one's life is far beyond this connotation. To be aware of this misuse brings me back to my initial point about the impact of language on the individual. Personally, I can no longer say that a certain situation is giving me anxiety because I not only understand, but I see those impacts on a daily basis. Nor can I equate her sense of comfort in being alone to her being antisocial. Although I think social anxiety has large impacts, I also try to make her aware that she's no different from anyone else, and likewise, can accomplish anything she puts her mind to. Finally, my role is to show her that just because social anxiety disorder is abbreviated as SAD, she is most definitely not characterized by those 3 letters. Overall, the biggest part about being that supporter is understanding the person you care about most, to essentially grasp what it is that helps them, because every individual differs in what they need. The steps that I took are no form of medical advice or a recommendation of some sort, but rather to show the importance of being that supporter. The steps that I took began with identifying it and not letting it be something that just goes away with time. In the initial ideas of this talk, not even as a TED talk, but just as an idea I felt I wanted and needed to be aware of, one of the first things I looked up was social anxiety misuse. Now, instead of finding articles on the true impacts of social anxiety in contrast to the way anxiety is used socially, I found websites on websites about how social anxiety will ultimately lead to drug and alcohol misuse. To be categorized as someone whose future is almost already predetermined already weighs down heavily on their self-esteem. This was the catalyst of my desire to learn about the technicalities, so as to link her actions to some sense of reasoning, really for my own reassurance. How to be a supporter isn't a question I can answer for anyone but myself, which I honestly can't even vouch I'm doing the best job at. But the reason I stand up here and talk so passionately about this is because it's hidden in many aspects. When someone is missing from school one day, just to come back the next and say, oh, I was sick, we believe them, because why question people? But that's also that wall that goes up with people who face social anxiety disorder. And despite the fact that it's a disorder in their head, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Although we think we know people, there's a lot that's unknown. Thank you.